Hey guys, welcome to Words Matter, Not Content, a Conversation. Today's topic is love ain't enough. So we are talking about relationships where you are in love with your partner, but something is off that's making it difficult to translate that relationship into a long-term or life partner. It's sad, right?
It's like the saddest story there is, right? Because like when you fall for somebody and they fall for you, I mean, we're going to get into it, but the setup is like all the Disney movies and all the, the Christmas holiday movies, right?
The Lifetime movies, yeah.
Love is all you need. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Let's keep it real, right? Love is not all you need. I wish that were true, and we should lead with more love, and all the things about love is great, but that's definitely not enough to sustain a long-term relationship, specifically like a very long-term relationship.
Yeah, that navigates like the ups and downs of life, right?
Yeah, like there's a lot of other things that matter as well. And so, yeah, it's a sad story when that happens.
It is. And like coming to that realization is hard.
And then you have to tell them like, I love you, but get out. Like
that's the articulate section where we tell you how to eloquently articulate to your partner how you're feeling.
Is something along the lines of, I love you. You're not enough.
Words matter, y'all.
Don't.
Bad advice, but no.
Don't do it.
No, I do think, though, something you'd mentioned when we talked about this before is that everyone's, like, not enough is different, right? And so it's, like, there's this, like, baseline love that is, like, I'm going to call, like, infatuation, like, general, like, you care about their well-being, you want them to succeed, you love who they are, like, inside and out, all of these things, but, you know, you have different goals from a career perspective, or you want to move at a different pace in life, or you want to live somewhere completely different, or your views on family are different. You know, there's like a million reasons, and everyone kind of has their own boxes that have to be checked that kind of exist outside of love, right?
I can't wait to challenge some of these with you. It's going to be an interesting conversation today.
What do you think is something for you that you've experienced where you've loved someone, but certain box, I'm going to say, maybe a box checked isn't the right word, but yeah, like there was something missing that was going to make it impossible for that relationship to thrive long term?
Well, I come from a background of dance and music and this and all that. So I have been in a relationship where I thought dance, music, art, creativity, these kinds of things didn't matter. It wasn't a language that we needed to speak at all.
With your partner.
With that person. That's correct. And so I was like, that'll be fine. That was wrong. And so like, we absolutely fell deeply in love. And then at some point it got to a place where I was just like, you can't see the depths of who I am. You can't speak this unspoken language with me. I have to break it down every time for you. And you're not really learning either because it's just so foreign to you.
Yeah.
Right. Similar to me in like math. Like I'm not going to be with like a math professor.
They're like passionately speaking about math and you're like, babe, I really want to get into this with you, but like 2 + 2 is what?
I'm like, babe, the square root of who? And what they wear?
And they're like, this guy. It's love, but it can't be long term. I can't speak math with him.
Just letting her down every day, right? So yeah, that's just not gonna work. It didn't work out for me. That's one example for me. How about you?
The music one's always interesting. I feel like that's one for me as well, where like music is such a big part of my life.
For sure.
I think another for me has been that I've realized over time is being with someone who equally values relationships outside of ours. And not even other romantic relationships, but just like the importance of like...
Which is okay, sorry.
Which is okay, but that's not where I'm going right now with this. But like the idea that we need to cultivate and continue growing and finding new connections outside of our partnership that fulfill other parts of our needs. And so that's something that I really value, and I love like going out and meeting new people and learning about them and building connection. And if I'm with a partner who doesn't equally value that, then we butt heads, like no matter how much I love them, that is like a really difficult roadblock to overcome. And it's a part of who I am and how I navigate the world. And I can't be with someone long term that doesn't value those same things and like walk the walk and, you know.
I think, and that's perfect because that's something for me as well now.
Yeah.
The example I just gave was an earlier version. Now I kind of I kind of fill a lot of different boxes, a lot of different ways, and I think I could be in a long-term relationship with somebody who's not fully into the music the way that I am, because I'm getting those boxes ticked from other places with other connections like you were referring to. But yeah, I totally 1000% understand that.
Yeah.
Totally reads and tracks for me.
I think the other example in like a more traditional sense is views on family. You know, someone that wants kids versus someone who doesn't, right? Like you can, this is a tough one. Like we both are someone, like we don't want kids, but I've had plenty of friends or even like my own experiences, like dating people who really want kids. And I'm like, no, like, and that is something, no. I do love kids. I really do.
She doesn't.
I just don't want to be pregnant.
You
I don't
should have seen
her
at Starbucks the other day.
No, I love
She literally
kids.
kicked a kid in the throat.
Not true. Not true. That's like something you would do.
I have done. No,
no, but that one's really tough because it's like you can have such a deep connection and such shared values, but if one person doesn't want kids and the other does, like how do you move past that?
You kind of don't, right? Unless, like, so to the point of this episode, we sometimes, love isn't enough because we're talking about, to fall in love with somebody, to be in love with somebody is an incredible feeling. And there's ups and there's downs and there's ins and there's outs, right? But then there's also, that's a separation from a life partner, somebody to do life with. And I think that's the biggest distinction I want to make today is like being in love, loving somebody, having all of this is incredible and there's a lot to it, but that is an entirely different thing than life partnership. I guess another example would be like starting a business with somebody. Like you can be my absolute best friend and we could be great on all fronts, but if we don't do business the same way, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
That's just a terrible idea. And it's the same conversation I think we're going to have today is more so about like, if you don't do life the same way.
Yeah.
And then here's another part that we haven't touched on yet, at least, is like evolution of life as well. At 25, 30 years old, the way you move and the things you do is very different than 45.
Yeah.
Would you agree? Right. She's like 52.
I'm like, I haven't been 45 yet. I'm young and hot.
Don't let her fool you. Don't let her. Wait a minute. Did you just say you young and hot? Hold up. First of all,
young and hot.
Just because you're getting older don't mean you can't be hot, bitch. Okay. To all the hot women out there that are older than her, you're still hot. And all the women who don't feel like they're hot, you are hot. Don't listen to her.
Feel free to reach out to me in my DMs, regardless of your age. Yeah, exactly.
She out here hustling. Okay, I've lost my train of thought. Where was I going? Oh, yeah, so 30.
Got me thinking about girls.
Difference between 30 and 45. And like, the thing is there's an evolution from 30 to 45. Let's say you go like this. That person with you needs to be going around that same kind of trajectory, or else if they're kind of just doing this and you're up here, love ain't enough.
Yeah, so I think that goes to an interesting point is like timing. So I think there's like a couple different timing things you're touching on. First is like when you think about the timeline of a connection, if there's like initial potential like disconnect in some of these areas, like when is the right time to call it out, right? And then secondly, let's say you have committed to a long-term partnership with someone, you know, you've been together a long time and you start to diverge the way you've just talked about, where you just start becoming two different people. At what point do you call it or not? And so I think that is a really tough question.
Speak to that too.
So let's start with like the first part of it, where it's like, okay, it's a new connection. You're excited. You've gone on some dates. Like you're like there's this spark, right? Like,
sure.
And that's, I mean, if anyone's out there dating right now, like that's rare, right?
If there's anyone out there dating right now.
If there's anyone, there might not. No, I'm kidding. Maybe everyone that watches our podcast.
Plenty of people dating.
Well, maybe everyone that watches our podcast is in a relationship.
Okay, they could still be dating. Maybe they're poly.
Maybe, but you get the point. If you're out there dating, you know it's fucking hard, and that it is hard to find people that you have that spark with. And so when you find it, it's this like intoxicating thing where you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, and
I love them.
And to your point, you almost go overboard, skipping a couple flags and timing things, right? Because you're like, I finally found, like, it connects.
It connects in all these ways. It's just like,
except this. You know what? Fuck that. I'll shave that little puzzle piece to make it fit. We're good.
Yeah. Exactly. And so it's hard because it's like, at what point do you call it, right?
Or
Because
don't shave it.
yeah, like, because there's an element of like, if you always, like, the moment you see a potential disconnect, like a real one, like something about like family or values or
Sure.
whatever, do you just immediately like cut the spark? Like, God, that's exhausting, right? Or like, that sucks. You get like, you don't get to experience some of that like fun and energy, or you like let it go on for a little while longer. It continues to get bigger, and then now you've spent like 4, 5, 6 months, a year with someone, and now you're starting to have to deal with these red flags that you've been ignoring for like a year. And I don't think there's always, I guess, like, my own answer to this is I don't think there's always a right or wrong answer to that. I think some things are worth exploring regardless, like if there is real spark, it's not a toxic relationship, there's some disconnect, maybe there's still value in allowing something to continue for a while, and maybe other times there's not. But
for me, when it comes to those, let's call them flags for the sake of the convo, it's
right.
like you really need to, let me clarify for everybody, right?
Oh, I can't wait. What are we clarifying?
Has anybody ever heard of like the example of like glass balls versus rubber balls?
For what?
Like, we're always juggling all these balls in our life. We're always doing this. And if you drop one, if it's rubber, it's coming back up. You can drop the ball, but if it's a glass ball,
you're done.
You're done. Let's look at this and examine your relationship, your spark, in the same way, right? If it's a rubber ball, if it's something silly, like they never take the trash, or they never take the trash out, or they never take the shopping cart back, or like, and that just bugs me. I feel like that's a rubber ball. I feel like it's gonna come back up and you'll be fine, right? If it's a far left political stance versus a far right political stance, you may have an entirely different lifestyle. That's a glass ball. Like, that's just an example. You could still make that work, but like, it is what it is. Like,
you have to juggle more carefully.
Yeah, you have to like really put a lot of attention on that glass ball, and that then comes down to, well, how much does love matter?
Is love enough?
Is love enough? Does love, right? Because that's the conversation, and like, I don't think it is when you're talking that stuff, but I do think that I do want to like take a slight pivot, because at the same time of love not being enough, love also demands that you hold space and you give real effort and you allow space to pivot in like certain things. Meaning, like, to your example, how long do you wait before you have, call it quits or whatever? I feel like if you actually love them, if you're not just infatuated with them and loving this spark of energy for the first 3 or 4 months, if you actually are in love with this person, then it warrants a real conversation. Let's sit down and talk about it. Hey, I lean very left, you lean very right, and this is really bothering me, and I'm not exactly sure how I want to manage this because I'm in love with you, but I can't stand that you're voting that way. Or you hate this and I love this and this matters a lot to me. And every time you just dismiss it, I feel unseen, whatever that may be, however you want to articulate that. I feel like those conversations are demanded by love. And if you're not willing to have those conversations, dare I say you weren't in love in the first place?
Potentially, yeah.
Maybe you just wanted to be in love. You just out here on Instagram. You on Instagram love.
That can be real. When you said Eileen, I thought you meant the name Eileen. And I was dying. I was like, he's using Eileen as like an example.
We want Fever Tree to sponsor this podcast. Tag them immediately.
Tag them.
That's what I think today. Who's Eileen?
I don't know. You come up with all sorts of weird examples. So like, Eileen was not the weirdest thing you've ever said on this podcast.
That's fair and
that's why when you said Eileen, and I literally go,
where is he going?
And I was like, oh, never mind.
Who the hell is Eileen?
I lean to the right. I lean to the left. I got you. I'm following now. But no, I agree that like it's having the conversation before just writing off. I'm just thinking, and also just looking at that.
Okay.
This feeling, but yeah, that it is worth having that conversation before just like writing someone off. Because I've had friends that date and they go out with someone like once or twice, and they immediately find things wrong, and it's just like they write off people.
Yeah.
And like, again, maybe like warranted at times, but sometimes I'm like, bitch, give it a little bit of a chance. You know what I mean? Like, let them.
Totally.
Yeah. And so that can be hard.
It's very hard. The dating scene in general is hard. And you're right. Like, people just immediately
And you get older and you know what you want, right? Like at 21, I was just like, well, whatever. And now it's like,
You're
no.
still a baby.
Yeah, exactly. Where now I feel a bit more like clear on some things that are non-negotiable, but still like being somewhat open-minded, but also not wasting your time with someone that thinks.
So what is your thoughts about like when do you cut, like in terms of timing, right? Because that is a real ass thing. Because what you just said was almost laughable, but not laughable when you were like, you know, when I was 21 and you're 31 now.
Mm-hmm. So.
And I'm 41, and I can tell you now, 31 and 41, entirely different people. Like vastly different people.
Yeah.
Everything you stand for and believe could be different. Not that it will, but it could be very different in 10 years.
Yeah.
And so like there's taking that into account, the only constant is change. We can't say that this person doesn't align with me all the way for the rest of my life. We can only say that this person doesn't align with who I am today. So I think that may be the answer to your question of like, when do you do it? I think you need to maybe, I don't want to say you need to, but I think what may be beneficial is to recognize who you are and does this person align with something that significant in your life? And if they don't, and it's bothering you every time, now it's worth a conversation. That's what we do at Words Matter. We have a conversation. It is not licensed for you to just ghost them. It is not licensed for you to just be like, yeah, this shit ain't gonna work. And go out and start dating somebody else. Talk to them.
Yeah.
You love them. Talk to them.
In quotes, love them. Yeah.
Well, you said you love them. Love means conversation.
I think something interesting that you said, because you were like, yeah, like the one constant is change, right? And so I could value X, Y, and Z now, and then I'm going to maybe value something different when I'm 41. And so maybe it's not about finding someone who I don't want to say who does. You don't want to find someone that values different things than you, but maybe it's more important to be aligned in like how you navigate change and pace of life.
That's
right,
absolutely
because it's like, yeah, maybe like if you're someone who's like just like naturally inclined to be like constantly learning, growing, like reading things and like learning new things and learning a new skill, and I'm going to take this class or whatever, and then you're dating someone or with someone who, and again, there's no like right or wrong way to like navigate.
There's no manual.
Who's a bit more like, no, like I'm a bit more on the chill side. Like I don't feel like I need to be like stimulated by new information all the time. Like I've invested in a couple things, and I like just doing my hobbies, and I'm good with that, and like keeping things stable and consistent. Like even if both of those people start out liking the same thing, in 10 years, those two people are going to be doing very different things, right? And so I think that may be like part of the key here is like, are you aligned in how you move through the world and the pace that you live at? And if
I have such a great example.
Yeah, if you are, that probably is a good indicator of future success.
1,000%.
More so than shared, like, we both love to dance. It's like, well, I might
somebody going to break a hip and you're going to be
exactly. So it's like that. I think that.
Break a hip?
Break a hip.
Yo, old ass. Okay. No, I have.
41's different. Yeah.
I have a perfect example. So 332 years ago, I was married. And yeah, what you looking at? And if anybody out there watching has ever shot guns before, right? If you put two guns right on top of each other and you shoot it 100 yards, and the top gun is like slightly, I mean, we're talking like that much off. At 50 yards, 100 yards, you're probably going to hit almost the same target. Mm-hmm. But if you move that to like 900 yards or 1,500 yards, this tiny little thing, the trajectory makes the bullets completely off.
Yeah.
Right. And in the beginning of that relationship and that marriage, we were madly in love. Mm-hmm. And 15 years later, we couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
Right. And then now let me add an extra component to it. There was nothing wrong. There was no animosity. We just were two different people. Mm-hmm. And then the other component that you just talked about was pace. Mm-hmm. I'm a New York dude. I'm all about that hustle. Let's go. Let's get something new. How are we moving? How are we doing? What am I doing for you? What are you doing for me? How are we going to get there? We're going to do it like this. You take that. I'll take that. Like, yo, I'm moving. Mm-hmm. She's very, very, very relaxed and chill and very comfortable making what she made and doesn't want. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that. But her level of ambition was like way lower than mine. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, those things combined, love ain't enough. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think that it's significant that we articulate why. The reason it's not enough is because you get one life. And you should be able to live it the way you want to live it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that love is meant to be a handcuff to keep you in a certain specific place in your life because you love somebody. If you're wanting to go there, that person who loves you should want you to go there.
Yeah.
And hopefully things align for them to go with you. Mm-hmm. That'd be beautiful.
Yeah. And I think, this is talked about a lot when people think about like what means success in like relationships. And it used to mean like you get married young and you stay together your entire life or whatever. But our lifespan has grown tremendously. When people used to live like way back, till they were 30. So when you got married at 15 or whatever, it's like,
you only had 10 years or something.
Yeah, exactly. You only had a couple years together. So it's like that lifelong
shit you had to get done.
Successful commitment
was like this.
completely different. And you were working your ass. You know what I mean? It was like a totally different world. Whereas now we live till 100 years old. Like we live many lifetimes now. And so it's like, I do want to say like love ain't enough. It's like, I don't mean that in a way that like we're saying that success is driven completely by like finding one person and being with them monogamously the rest of your life. And that's the only way you can be successful. I think this is more of like just thinking about whatever like long-term relationship means to you. And I think people can have like multiple successful long-term relationships in their lives because we live so fucking long. And so like, I think, we're talking about that break later. So after the 15 years of marriage and realizing you're two separate people and that love may not be enough, but that's actually not a bad thing. Like it actually is like okay because you have this second like lease on life where it's like you have another 40 years ahead of you, and this like initial relationship served its purpose in its time, and now you've decided love isn't enough and you've moved on to something else in the hopes of finding another person to like spend the second half of your life with. And I think that can still be really successful. Even if the relationship ends.
Totally. And I want to add one extra piece to that. It's like, if you find that person and you are misaligned and you're staying together for the sake of love, because you do love that person, nobody's debating or negating it, right? You can be in love with somebody, you can love them with your entire heart and them not be the right person for you. Mm-hmm. That's a thing, but you cannot be aware of it or you're not willing to accept it. And you're like, no, love is all I need. Yeah. We're going to push through this stuff. Yeah. I'm telling you now that misalignment has the power to cancel your love and start to create resentment in its place. Yeah. That is a thing. So, I would say maybe now is the great time for you to tell us, like, how do we start recognizing when that love may not necessarily be becoming a resentment or when it, but like, how do we recognize signs?
Recognizing that like there's more, than just like love that needs to play into something. So I think if you're this is probably makes most sense for like if you're in like a long-term-ish partnership, like you've been dating someone for a while. And I think if you're recognizing patterns of unmet needs.
Keyword there.
Yeah, patterns, right? And so this isn't just like one-off things. Again, this is something you're seeing like consistent feelings of like frustration or dissatisfaction despite like those feelings that you have for the other person. And so like if there's unmet needs from like an emotional perspective, like mental stimulation perspective, and you just like can't get on the same page over time, like that can be a sign.
Can you give an example of that?
So I think maybe one example would be from an emotional perspective would be the level of, I'm going to think of something kind of light, but like how often you want to like connect and like communicate. Like I think some people really like to be like texting frequently, calling frequently, sharing conversation frequently, and other people maybe don't. And so, if you're someone who really values that and like this person continually cannot, after you've stated that that's important to you, cannot meet that need, and that's something that's like really inherent to like how you navigate the world and how you feel secure, then that might be a sign that there's like an incompatibility that regardless of whether you love them or not isn't going to work. That one's a little lighter, but I think it's very valid. And again, we all get to pick what's important and what's not. You know what I mean?
100%. So, no rules.
Yeah, exactly. You get to make your own rules. We love that. I think another one is like repeated conflict without any sort of resolution. So you're fighting about the same things over and over again. And let's assume in this case that you're fighting fair. You know what I mean? That both people are showing up like emotionally intelligently with some relational intelligence, like you're communicating your wants, needs, and desires, yet you really cannot overcome certain disagreements, right?
Sure.
You just can't get on the same page. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's exactly why we got.
Good to know. No, I'm kidding.
So if anybody would like to DM her. No, okay. So give us another sign of when love isn't enough.
So another sign would be repeated conflict without resolution. So you're fighting about the same things over and over again and never really coming to any sort of like agreement or resolution or getting on the same page. And so this can just be an exhausting dynamic to be in, and also just kind of show that like, although we're assuming that you're both fighting fair. You know what I mean? Like bringing up these difficult conversations and sharing authentically and like hearing each
Leading
other out.
With vulnerability.
Yeah, like doing all the right things, yet you're still just not able to see eye to eye on certain things. Like you're doing the work and it's still not kind of paying off. Like that could be a sign.
And that's significant, right? Because that's something that I've been saying this whole time is like, if you are actually indeed in love, then it deserves the work.
Yeah, exactly.
It deserves the work. Don't just, I'm cool. And dismiss.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like the second part of this is like in that first example, we're assuming, you know, they're checking all the boxes, doing all the right things. Part of this is also if you or your partner are like avoiding conflict altogether. And so just like kind of skirting around issues. And this is where you like the unspoken resentment, and you were talking about like how these types of things can lead to resentment. And so I think like a good question to ask yourself if you're in a relationship and thinking about these things is like, are we tackling problems together? Like, do we avoid things to just like keep the peace? Like those types of questions. And like when we do have conflict, do we feel like afterwards we're growing closer together or farther apart?
You know what? I have a rule. For myself that I kind of learned / made in therapy. And it's when I'm dating or if I have a new partner or whatever, I am not allowing myself to say I love you, or I've almost trained myself to not even feel love, or if you will, until we've had a real ass fight. And when I say a real ass fight, I mean like a real ass, let me see how you move through conflict. That's important.
It is.
Because nobody on earth is going to be able to sustain that honeymoon phase for the duration of your life. Yeah. What are we talking about? You're going to, and if you're trying to have a life partner, if that is your aim, that may not be your aim. If that is your aim, you're going to fight. And fight maybe is not the word, but there's going to be conflicts, there's going to be misalignments, there's going to be disagreements. And like how we navigate that is significant. It's something that I ask on like the third date these days. It's like, hey, how do you navigate conflict or disagreement?
Are you like, next question?
Yeah. Oh, avoidant.
Yeah, I just...
No, I'm just... With pressure. Flying around.
Sound effects. I don't know how those are going to translate, but sure, yes. Oh
Can't be worse than T-ball.
Nothing's worse than T-ball.
No, Diddy.
Oh my God. Okay. And yeah, so I think the final thought here is just lack of shared goals and vision. So really like what you want your future to look like, whether that's like career progression, financial goals, family, like really those like core values. Like, are you on the same page? And if you're not, and you don't have any shared goals about the future, that could be a sign that love ain't enough. And that it's going to get trickier the farther you move into something. And so that feeling of being on separate paths, even though you have like love and affection. Love and affection towards someone else. So those are a couple.
Yeah.
To help people like kind of start thinking about
great.
This if they're starting to have those feelings about their partner potentially.
Okay, so now for the articulation, right? And we're going to do both of them. Maybe like just talking about the issue in your relationship for one, and then also, sadly, kind of like the breakup, right? And I think I'll probably start with that.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what you would say to somebody that you were madly in love with, but it isn't going to work because love isn't enough. This is how you would break up with that person. Hey, babe, I just want to start by saying how much I love you. You mean the world to me, and I've seen how much you've given in your life and how much I try to give for you. And unfortunately, we just keep coming back to the same thing where we're missing. And it's not because I don't love you. I love you more than you can understand. But we keep coming back to this and we're missing, and it's making me feel some type of way. And I'm not sure how to get over that. And we've tried to have these conversations. We've tried to work it out. We've tried to do all these things. It's not really working. And so I think that we're going to have to call it and see how things can go without each other for a bit. And if that maybe brings us back, I'm not exactly sure. But unfortunately, just love isn't enough right now for me.
I think, like, as someone on the other side, I'm tempted to say, no, I can fix it in this moment. I'm like, no, give me another shot. Like,
I love that. No, keep going.
Yeah, I can fix it. I can be different. I can adjust. I just need more time.
And babe, I want to tell you, nothing on earth would make me happier than to believe that. Mm-hmm. But we've been in that position, which you just said, 3 or 4 times now over the past 6 months. We've really made real efforts, and it's still not landing in a way where I feel whole. Mm-hmm. And it's making me believe that, like, it has nothing to do, you've done nothing wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've done anything wrong. Yeah. We both try really hard in this relationship. Chemistry doesn't equate compatibility. Love doesn't equate lifestyle compatibility. Not every time. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think that's where we are. And I'm a bit concerned that if I don't say this now, love itself will start to dissipate and be replaced with resentment. Yeah. And so by doing this now, I'm hoping to keep you in my life as somebody that I care for the rest of my life as a friend. Mm-hmm. Even deeper than a friend. Not necessarily a relationship, but somebody I still love for the rest of my life.
Yeah. And I think even, like, just to add a little bit to that would be to call out that you don't want them to change. Like, you know, because at this point they're saying, like, no, I'll do more, I'll change, like, whatever. And it's like, if you love someone, you don't want them to change who they are, right? Like, they're again, we're assuming these are values that aren't bad.
I can change. No.
You know, like, that they've tried to make adjustments, they haven't. And it's like, I don't want to ask you to change anymore. I don't want to ask you to shave down your puzzle piece.
Yeah,
like,
you shouldn't have to.
I'm also just, I want the same thing for you that I want for myself, which is, like, full authenticity. Don't shave the puzzle piece down. And so by you asking for more time and asking to try harder, it doesn't really solve the problem because you're just making yourself smaller.
Sure.
To make this work. So.
Okay, so now let's take it back and let's go to the other example.
Okay.
Instead of us breaking up. This is an example of how to potentially articulate that there's a mismatch in the relationship, like, let's say, having kids.
Okay.
And this is what you might say.
Okay.
Something along the lines of, hey, babe, this is just one of those check-ins where we check in. I'm having some feelings that we need to discuss. Mm-hmm. You know I love you. You know I'm here for you. You know I love our relationship. But I have said before that it's pretty clear that I do not want kids. And you said you're unsure, but it's starting to feel like you're pretty sure that you want kids. And I love that for you. And as much as I love you, I don't want to keep you from having kids if that's something that you really love. But I'm pretty certain, like 99%, that I do not want kids. So I feel like we should have this conversation because I don't know where that leaves us. Because when we're out in public and we're in Starbucks or wherever we are, and there's kids around, you get goo goo gaga, and I can't wait to leave. I'm like, I gotta go. And that's a mismatch. And that's not fair to you, and that's not fair to me. But also, it doesn't mean that I don't love you. So I want to have these conversations so we can try to figure it out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, kind of like ending with a question, you know, like, is there a way we can, I mean, and this one's hard, but, like, is there a way we can compromise? Like, is there a way we can meet in the middle? Like where,
compromise.
or like, I know that one's kind of tough, but, or like, can you explain more around like why you want to have kids? You know, like kind of like digging into it deeper to like
leading with curiosity, like you always
say.
say.
Yeah, leading with curiosity, because the whole point of this one's to have a conversation, right?
Right.
Like you haven't decided yet that like it's the
We're not done
point.
yet, but I'm starting to notice. This is the recognize, right? I'm starting to recognize every time I'm with you and I see a kid, you're like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh my God.
So like, how is this going to impact us? How do you see this impacting your future? And
how do you see us finding our way through this? Like, all those different things. But also like, I understand your approach of like ending with a question, but sometimes I have found that ending with a question can sometimes overwhelm them, especially if they're the kind of person that needs to process for a bit before they respond. So asking that question may be like, I feel on the spot. So sometimes I like to just leave it open like that and just leave space and just sit in it. But both are good and neither is right or wrong.
That makes me think of what we talked about how two different conversation types, people who ask questions and people who leave with statements, right?
We
talked about this.
What is it?
Like unlocking the door. No.
Oh,
we'll have to find it, but the whole idea is that like there's people have conversations in two ways. Like some people engage by like continually asking questions back and forth, or like that's like their way of involving themselves, and other people just make statements with the expectation that other people will make statements in response.
100%.
And so me being like, end it with a question, and you're like, I just make a statement. It's like, well.
Again, relational intelligence is the thing. And
there's two ways to do it.
There's no right or wrong. It's just that and there are times when we switch where because you're very make a statement at times, and I'm definitely very ask questions. Yeah. So like it just depends on the topic of conversation. Yeah. So like there's no right or wrong, but that's an excellent point.
Yeah. It really made me think of that.
That's funny. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's land the plane. Let me just ask you directly. In your life, is love enough?
I want it to be, but I don't think it always is.
Do you though? No.
Words matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, sadly, I don't think it is. Mm-hmm. And I also want to say that that's okay.
Yeah.
Some of my closest, most intimate relationships are non-physical and non-romantic. Mm-hmm. Fully in love, fully intimate, closer than any romantic relationship I've ever been in.
Yeah.
Not together in that sense. And it's okay to have that. And maybe that's what you're meant to be with that person that love is not enough with in terms of a romantic relationship. But love, and that makes me just say one last thing, I'm sorry. Love is absolutely enough. In general.
I was going to say that as well. Like we've been talking about love isn't enough, and we mean that from a like romantic long-term
life partner
connection. Yeah. Is love enough for like just having fucking joy in your life and building connections that are meaningful? Regardless of time limit and how they show up, like romantic, platonic, whatever.
Totally.
Then yes. So yes, to be clear, All You Need Is Love by the Beatles. You know what I mean? It's like, it does...
We don't have that kind of budget for the licensing for that. Sorry.
Okay. I was going to sing it, but I don't think I'm going to do
We'll
that
get in
anymore.
trouble, don't
we? Exactly. So, is love enough? Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
This has been Words Matter.